Hi, I'm Jay Parson. Thank you for clicking on this very first video that's launching my channel. The Canadian election is fast approaching, and that's where I'd like to start. Let's go. Mark Carney may think he's fighting a tariff battle against Trump. He's not. The Trump team is dedicated to opposing the globalists, and Mark Carney is a key architect of the globalist movement. What Trump is doing against globalism is such a major shift in the world. It's a 180-degree reversal of U.S. policy for the last 3 decades. Every president since Clinton has promoted globalism. Carney, as a practice expert at globalist policies and ideas, is in fact the weakest choice to face the Trump team, who built their ideas from the ground up to combat the globalists. So what do the globalists want? And also, what does Trump want? These are the policies the globalists support and Trump's take on each of them. The globalists want net zero, an end to oil and gas use, and they want to fund renewables. Trump wants to increase oil and gas production to reduce the price and to let renewables compete without subsidies. Globalists want stakeholder capitalism, a new kind of command economy where company profits come second to globalist stakeholder priorities for each company. Trump wants to keep free market capitalism. Globalists want global governance. Trump wants national governance, where America can compete against economies weakened by socialism. Globalists want massive immigration for Western countries. Trump wants controlled legal immigration. Globalists want American decline as the world's superpower and Chinese communist rise to superpower status. Trump wants to reverse American decline and outcompete China. Globalists want total information control. Trump wants free speech. Globalists want DEI. Trump wants equal rights for all. Globalists want gender ideology. Trump wants 2 genders only, and teachers who suggest to children that they are in the wrong body will be committing a crime. Globalists want criminal justice reform, including catch and release and bail not jail policies. Trump wants to end crime and restore law and order. Globalists want high government spending and socialist policies. Trump wants low spending, cheap gas, low inflation, and low regulation to grow the economy. Globalists are pro-Hamas, and Trump is against Hamas. I'm not asking here why the globalists support these things. Each one of these questions will likely be a future video for me. What I want you to note here is that everything the globalists want is in direct opposition to what Trump wants. This is what the tariffs are about. They are a tool in Trump's fight against the globalists. Trump's tariffs force you to come to the negotiating table, and they prime you to give some things up that you wouldn't have without the threat of tariffs. What's Trump's problem with globalism? The big dream of the globalists is global governance, a push to make voluntary international agreements mandatory. An example, the UN Global Compact for Migration, signed at the end of 2018. A global governance push for massive increases in immigration to Western countries. At the end of the signing, we see large surges of immigration in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Australia, and in Canada. We see the EU cooperating with the UN to enforce these huge immigration surges on member countries. Countries that refuse are punished, like Hungary, fined and threatened, like Poland, like Czech Republic. Canada's version of this immigration surge is called the Century Initiative. It aims for a population of 100 million in Canada by the year 2100. That works out to a population increase of 800,000 people per year. The U.S. didn't sign the Compact for Migration, but Biden's open border amounted to the same surge in migration in the same time frame. How do we know Trump opposes the globalists? During his election campaigning, he was explicit. The number one biggest threat to America was internal. The warmongers and globalist America haters. He said the number 2 threat was China, who the globalists also support.
There must also be a complete commitment to dismantling the entire globalist neocon establishment that has perpetually dragging us into endless wars, pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad. And it's the globalist class that has made us totally dependent on China and other foreign countries that basically hate us. These globalists want to squander all of America's strength, blood, and treasure, chasing monsters and phantoms overseas while keeping us distracted from the havoc they're creating right here at home. These forces are doing more damage to America than Russia and China could ever have dreamed.
The U.S. House Judiciary Committee is investigating the group that Mark Carney co-founded and led, GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. With GFANZ, Carney organized some of the largest bankers and fund managers in the world into what the committee called a cartel, who agreed to block financing for oil and gas projects and organized attack campaigns against boards of directors and tried to coerce oil and gas companies into cutting production. What Carney's GFANZ did at ExxonMobil is mind-blowing. In 2020, GFANZ attempted to take over the board of directors after that board refused to make a series of climate pledges, including cutting production. GFANZ launched a campaign to remove the company's board members. They threatened BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street to support the board removal, or else they would organize a multi-billion-dollar investment withdrawal from those funds. The group succeeded in removing 3 board members at ExxonMobil and replacing them with GFANZ-approved members. I don't think you will ever see a more clear-cut case of illegal antitrust behavior. With possible antitrust charges incoming, members of GFANZ have been bailing to avoid legal liability and large financial penalties. Here's a list of the largest American and Canadian banks that are bailing on Carney's Net Zero Alliance at GFANZ. The same exodus is occurring worldwide. It turns out that while it's perfectly legal to organize a consumer boycott, it is very illegal for groups of companies to organize a boycott of a competing company. GFANZ was cooperating with the UN on their Sustainable Development Goals, where Carney was the special envoy on climate action and finance. It's a clear example of the globalists' global governance push in action with Mark Carney at the helm. Carney promotes replacing the US dollar as the world reserve currency with an international digital currency or with the Chinese RMB to reduce the US dollar's domineering influence on trade worldwide. Can you see why Trump would object to this? The reserve currency is a strong US advantage. Everybody in the world wants US dollars. You need it to buy oil, for example. That high demand keeps the value of the US dollar high, and it keeps it stable too. In fact, the U.S. government can get loans at lower interest rates because those U.S. dollar loans are safer, because lenders know the dollar won't crash. The Trump team sent a questionnaire to university researchers in Canada, Europe, and Australia who are receiving U.S. funds. Now look at question 12. Does this project reinforce U.S. sovereignty by limiting reliance on international organizations or global governance structures? This is Trump declaring his intent to defund global governance research, promotion, and the organizations themselves. Trump withdraws from the Paris Climate Accord, the UN Human Rights Council, UN RWA. He begins withdrawing from the WHO, and he sets up a broader review of UN funding over anti-American bias. That was several examples of Trump opposing globalist policies at GFANZ, with the globalist aim to dethrone the US dollar, with the globalist project's research and promotion at universities, and with UN groups and global groups with globalist aims. That same systematic approach to blocking globalist projects will be turned towards Canada's chief globalist, Mark Carney. What will Carney do if elected? If he chooses to fight Trump, and he's not going to do that, a tariff war is enormously more damaging to Canada than the US. More than 70% of Canadian exports go to the US. Exports to Europe are tiny in comparison. We would lose far more by fighting with the US than we could gain by expanding European trade. Trump has been clear about how he wants us to respond to his threat of tariffs. Do not retaliate. And Carney did retaliate. Do not coordinate to harm the U.S. Negotiate. Trump is removing every option you have except coming to the table to negotiate. So what does Trump want when we come to the table? An end to Chinese interference in the Americas. That's what the Panama Canal was about?
During his inaugural address, President Trump made it known that the United States cannot and will not allow the Chinese Communist Party to continue with its effective and growing control over the Panama Canal.
And that's what Greenland is about.
This territory, Greenland, really matters for the security of the United States. It's extremely vulnerable right now. And if the people of Greenland were willing to partner with the United States, and I think that they ultimately will partner with the United States, we could make them much more secure. We could do a lot more protection, and I think they'd fare a lot better economically as well. What is the alternative? To give up the North Atlantic, to give up the Arctic to China, to Russia, and to other regimes that don't have the best interest of the American people at heart?
Fentanyl is the reverse opium war that China has been waging on the West. In Canada, that involves drug production, shipping, money laundering, with Chinese triads and Mexican cartels operating in Canada.
Key thing to focus on is that someone was making over 100 million doses of deadly fentanyl in a lab that you didn't know about, right under your nose. Now, how many other labs do you think you have going? And let me focus on one last thing. There's very little border enforcement. So 42 kilograms, it's a nonsensical number. We don't have, most of the drugs are going from Mexico to Canada and then being brought south into the Northwest United States on ships. You have almost no port enforcement with police. So we have no idea, except from our sources, what's going on. And we hear some bad things. Your problem is your laws. It's the Stinchcomb law, which I'm not, like the world's expert on, but basically every time we try to go up on a phone number in Canada, and almost all the money laundering networks tied to China, which is about 90% of all money laundering in the United States, is tied to Canada. Okay, so when we try to go up on those numbers with your police, they have to inform the person that we're targeting their number. That's crazy. How can we run an undercover police operation with your country? Which is why we don't run them, which is why the seizure statistics are so low, because we don't even try to work with Canada because your laws are abbreviated and distorted.
Trump will demand that Canada cooperates with U.S. law enforcement, that we cooperate on Arctic defense with them against Russian and Chinese incursion, and that we block Canadian election interference by the Chinese Communist Party. Trudeau's donor list from BC looks unusual. Donations typically come from your own riding, in this case Papineau in Montreal. There's no way of knowing if these donations are foreign interference without probably CRA audits for suspicious cases. Trump will demand a stop to watchlist migrants using Canada to enter the U.S. We can see last year 155 watchlist encounters from the Mexico border and 358 from the Canadian border. That's 2.3 times more coming from Canada than from Mexico. The U.S. is running about a $60 billion a year trade deficit with Canada. I think Canada can make a good case that this trade balance is already fair. The U.S. buys oil and gas at 15 to 30% below the world price from Canada. That killer discount is the result of Liberals blocking pipelines, tankers, liquid natural gas projects. Here's a collection of cancelled energy projects in Canada that were blocked by the Trudeau Liberals. We have 7 natural gas projects, 3 pipelines, and 6 oil projects. Remove oil and gas, and the U.S. is actually running a $40 billion surplus every year with Canada. The reason oil and gas should be removed from the trade balance numbers is that big discount. Americans are buying Alberta natural gas at 30% below the world price. They're liquefying it and selling it overseas at a great profit. You are not being taken advantage of on Canadian energy, America. Expect to see reduced tariffs on both sides in a new trade deal. And even more, I expect to see non-tariff trade barriers reduced. If you look at Canada on the chart here, our non-tariff barriers are 4 times the size of our tariff barriers. Expect the Trump trade team to be focused on these non-tariff barriers. One thing we know they will demand is protection for American social media, AI, and tech companies. How do we know that? In a departure from his strategy of keeping his negotiation demands close to his chest, Trump and his team came right out and told the UK, your online harms laws and the new ones you're planning are government censorship. They attack free speech and they cause harm to American companies like X, like Facebook, like Google. These harmful laws are a key consideration in any US-UK trade deal.
We do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
There we have J.D. Vance spelling it out, that this is a key American aim in trade deals. And here's the State Department reinforcing the same message and telling the UK the US State Department is meeting with a UK citizen facing criminal charges for offering conversation near a fetus disposal clinic. And the State Department is monitoring her case, and they disapprove. On the non-tariff trade barrier talks, Trump will be pushing hard to protect free speech in Canada. So, Carney can't fight with counter-tariffs. He can't fight by coordinating with Europe. Both would bring larger tariffs down on Canada. This fight is bigger than Canada-US trade and borders. It's about Trump's fight to defeat the Davos globalist crowd, Trump's real enemy. If Canada chooses Carney, we're siding with America's enemy in this fight, and Carney can't win. So, we have China out, watch list people blocked, a new trade deal signed with the US. What's left for Carney to do that won't provoke Donald Trump? Click on this next video to see Carney's real plan for Canada.